start.
Hello everyone, welcome to a Climate-Wise Communities workshop and a 3D Bushfire Simulation workshop too. My name is James Chan. I'm from Ku-ring-gai Council. I am a Sustainability Project Officer. And with me here today is Dr. Jenny Scott, Sam Tucker from the RFS, Angus Lord from the RFS, and Mark Schuster from the Ku-ring-gai Council. And also Dr. Jenny Scott is also from Ku-ring-gai Council. So the quick run of the evening will be, we will do a roundtable introduction of all the panelists. And then we will, then Dr. Jenny Scott will take over and start the workshop. We'll lead off with a simulation of a bushfire using the sim table, and then we'll also, in that simulation, we'll also cover off some of the tools you can use to prepare for bushfire and other natural hazards. So I'll just pass over to Dr. Jenny Scott, who will introduce herself, and then followed by all the other members of the panel.
Okay, thanks, James, and welcome everyone. I'm the Sustainability Program Leader at Council, and we've been running this Climate-Wise Communities program for a number of years now. And each year we try and enhance and develop it and take advantage of different tools that become available as the research and development progresses. We're in the throes of developing a Climate-Wise Communities 2.0, which we hope to have up and running early next year or perhaps mid next year, depending on how things go. And that will have a few new tools to it that we can showcase to you. So Sam, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm Sam Tucker. I'm the Community Engagement Officer for Ku-ring-gai Bushfire Brigade. I've been a member for 11 years and we work very closely with Ku-ring-gai Council to keep you all safer and more resilient against bushfire and other natural hazards. There you go.
Thank you.
G'day guys, my name's Angus Lord. I work alongside Sam Tucker in the community engagement sphere with the Ku-ring-gai Bushfire Brigade. I've been a member for about almost 3 years now. It's been an absolute privilege and very exciting to come here tonight and be able to give you guys as much info as we can on bushfire history and what you can do to better prepare in the Ku-ring-gai area.
Hello everyone, I'm Mark Schuster from Ku-ring-gai Council. I'm the Bushfire Technical Officer or Bushfire Ranger, and I'm also known as Skippy. That's my local acronym. I work on the cutting edge between asset protection with bushfire and the ecological side of bushfire. And putting those two things together in Ku-ring-gai, it's quite a task. So I'm here to help everyone tonight. Thanks.
Great, thanks everyone. So as James mentioned, we're going to lead off tonight showing you what a catastrophic fire looks like. Now, we have an American example to show you. We hope in the future to have an Australian example to show you. But at the moment, the one that we use is called the Camp Fire. And it was a fire that happened back in 2018 in the northern part of California. And it was a rather fast-moving fire that was under very dry circumstances. It had been hot and dry for a number of weeks leading up to this. Now, this particular area where this fire occurred didn't have a fire history. It had never had a big fire through. They'd had smaller fires, but nothing like this. And it's that typical Northern California terrain of steep mountain slopes and then leading down to a plain near the coast. And the fire actually started about 6 a.m. in the morning. So what I'll get James to do is to bring up an image of that sim table.
Actually, Jenny, if it's okay, I forgot to mention that we have a poll to survey residents about their current status of bushfire preparedness. Would it be okay if I launch that poll now, just before we start the simulation?
Sure.
Okay, so everyone, as I just mentioned, I forgot to do this earlier on, but we have a little poll here for you where we'd like to survey where you are at in your current bushfire preparedness. So this poll is 10 questions, and you need to be able to answer every question before we can submit your answers. However, it's not a test. There's no wrong answer. So you just choose whatever answer best suits your situation. And if an answer doesn't apply to you, just click not applicable or whatever button it applies to you. So I'll launch that poll, and it will only take maybe a minute or two to complete. It's very quick. So I'll launch it now.
And
the first question is, do you live in a bushfire prone land or emperor zone? You just tick, if you're unsure what your zoning is, you just tick unsure. And the other question is, is very straightforward. Have you experienced a bushfire? Just put your answer in there, and so forth. If anyone has any problems answering the poll, please just put your questions into the chat box. Also, there is a Q&A function here as well. So if you have any questions you would like to ask the panelists at the end of the workshop, please put your questions into the Q&A box as well. And regarding bushfire plans, if you don't have a plan, or if you have a plan, take the NA, I have a plan. And that's for question 4. The question 5 is about where do you keep your plan? And if you answered no in the previous question, question 3, just take NA for that. And this question 6 is related to whether or not you have a plan. Again, just tick the box as to whether or not how confident you are in that. And I think the rest of the questions there are fairly straightforward. In question 8, just tick whatever one applies to you, as many as you like, or as few. And all the other questions are fairly straightforward as well. Okay, so the survey, I think most people have answered their questions now. So in the next couple of seconds, I will close the poll and proceed with the Paradise Fire simulation. Okay, so I think most people have answered the survey, so I'll end it now. So thank you very much for participating in that survey. That really helps us a lot to understand where you are in terms of your bushfire preparedness. Okay, so I'll end the poll now. Okay, so thank you very much for that. So next, I will now share my screen, and you will see the simulation of the Paradise Fire. Can everyone see the Paradise Fire? The area that's covered by Paradise Town and Ku-ring-gai.
okay, thanks, James. So I know the print, well, at least on my computer, is very small, but James will point out to you where the different townships of interest are. And the first township of interest is a place called Pulga, which is not far from where the fire started. As James wanders over the screen.
I know.
A little to the right there, James.
Buttons to click. That's Ku-ring-gai there. And also, we also have another panelist here joining us. Before we get too far along, we have Michelle Harris from the RFS. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Michelle. Thanks for coming. So the other township we have is Paradise, and that's our main focus of attention. for this particular progression. And we have the Pulga up in the right-hand corner, which is where James is wandering around at the moment. You found it, James? Well done. Okay. So those three locations, this is a place called Butte County, by the way, if anybody wants to look it up on the map. And like I said, back in 2018, very hot conditions, like our catastrophic fire day. The wind was blowing very strong already at 6 a.m. in the morning. And the vegetation on the ground was extremely dry and it was very hot. So the perfect conditions for a fire to get out of control. And as luck would have it, some power lines came down and ignited the fire. So I'll get James to start the progression. Now this footprint that you will see is from the satellite data. So you'll also notice down the bottom there is a time ticking over from the point of ignition. So there's the fire starting about 6:15 a.m. And you can see how quickly the fire front is growing. Now, people in Con-Cow and Paradise, of course, could see this smoke and were ringing their 911 for information about what should they do. They were told there was no threat to them and that they would be notified should a threat occur. So the fire progressed very rapidly. They did deploy fire trucks. They couldn't deploy aerial appliances because of the winds. And the fire trucks couldn't get to the seat of the fire because the mountain roads were too windy and steep. And you can see now a spot fire has started just to the east of the main fire front. That's about 6 kilometres ahead of the existing fire front, and it's starting up a whole new fire and set of fires just north of the township of Con-Cow. Now still, we're only, I think, about 7:30 in the morning, and you can see that another spot fire has ignited just on that western flank of Paradise. And people saw the fire. The fire plans for the township were initiated, where they send out a signal in progression for different zones to evacuate themselves. However, the phone towers had come down, and as it transpired, only about 10% of the community ever got a warning of this fire. And so the fire is coming along very rapidly. As you can see, each spot fire is building quite quickly into slowly forming a new fire front on that western side of the township. So it was already cutting off one of the major exits out of the town. And people were trying to get out, but of course the traffic was congested and the roads were at a standstill. And the firefighters and the police were doing their best to clear the roads and get the traffic moving. But this was all unfolding way too quickly. So lots of people were only just leaving with their clothes on their back. They had no time to get anything else. So as this fire builds in intensity, you can see this massive fire front now that's formed there to the west. And now to the east, a whole new set of spot fires has triggered. And it is gradually cutting off the exit to the south. The exit to the north is very soon to be cut as well. And the way this fire is travelling, there is one exit left and it's about to be cut now. So effectively now people are trapped inside the town. And so they were sheltering wherever they could as best they could. And the emergency services were putting out distress calls to other agencies, just saying they were being wiped out. Now you can see on the eastern side, that is a massive fire front. And on the western side, the fire front is building very rapidly. and there are many spot fires in the township itself. By the time this fire would burn itself out, there was over 90 people killed in this fire. They lost around 18,000 houses, and it was the most expensive fire in American history, with something like $16 billion of losses, and inside that was $4 billion of uninsured losses. So it was a very difficult few days for the fireys, but most of the losses occurred in the first 2 hours. So the distance travelled some 16 kilometres from the point of ignition through the township, and then it started spreading south, affecting other towns. But it wasn't travelling quite as fast to the south. You can see its main fire direction is towards the west. It eventually was put out by a rainstorm that fortunately came along, and it was substantial heavy rain for a period of time. So when we think about preparing for significant events, it's this kind of event that we think about, how are we going to handle if this kind of event, if and when it occurs in Ku-ring-gai. So we saw during Black Summer many instances of fires that probably were close to, if not at this level of intensity and speed. And we know major fires have occurred before around the area of Ku-ring-gai. So Angus, would you like to say anything about the fire history or what's happened in Ku-ring-gai before?
Yeah, thanks, Jenny. So the Hornsby Ku-ring-gai Bushfire Management Council indicates in their latest report that they expect a major fire event in Ku-ring-gai every 7 to 10 years, and that's with 40 somewhat not insignificant bushfires occurring approximately 40 a year. So in essence, what I'm trying to say is that Ku-ring-gai is, I don't want to say due for one, but you think of the last significant event that impacted on Ku-ring-gai was the 1994 bushfires, which burned all the way through Ku-ring-gai Chase and then obviously Lane Cove National Park as well. And Ku-ring-gai was very lucky to be one of the, I mean, you think about it, almost one of the only areas not to be significantly impacted by bushfire in the 2019-2020 season. The closest we had was the Gospers Mountain fire north of us, which thankfully did not jump the Hawkesbury River. That was probably our saving grace somewhat, that it was held at the Hawkesbury. But Ku-ring-gai has a significant amount of properties backing onto the bush in that bushfire impact area, and then obviously in the Ember attack zone, which we'll talk on later. So this community is quite vulnerable, so we need to be prepared.
Great, thanks Angus. Okay, so now we're going to zoom back home into Ku-ring-gai, and we're going to think about what might happen if we get a major fire here. Now, at the same time, we're going to show you what we can do about major fires. So before we kick this fire off, Mark, would you like to just give us a quick rundown about what Council's doing to prepare for the fire season?
Yeah, actually, this next fire season is much like the last for you out there. Patches of rain, there'll be a fair bit of heat, but what I've found walking around a lot of the interface is that there's very heavy to extreme fuel loads in many areas. So what we do as a council, we've got a number of methods to reduce the risk. Certainly we have things called asset protection zones in many areas along the interface. That's to reduce radiant heat up against houses. Another thing we have a series of hazard reduction burns to reduce fuel, but you've got to remember that fuel accumulates fairly rapidly. After about 3 to 5 years, the fuel's pretty well back up there to carry a fire. So they're our main methods, mechanical and hazard reduction burning. Of course, there's other methods like this, which are so successful. That's community preparedness. So that's what we're on about tonight, and just so important because our interface is so big. Where some people say the second or third most fire-prone LGA in New South Wales, and that's certainly true. We've got 120 kilometres of interface, so it's pretty heavy bushland along there. So that's what we're trying to do, and it's a real challenge for everyone. It's not just councils, for everyone's involved. Thanks, Jenny.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, so it is a challenge for everyone in Ku-ring-gai, and it's something that the agencies alone and council can't manage on their own. This critically has to involve the community as well if we're going to be more resilient to these major events. Now we're going to zoom in on the north side of Ku-ring-gai and have a look at what might happen there. Ku-ring-gai has some 14,000 houses on the bushland interface, and that's because there is such as Mark just mentioned, such a long and convoluted interface because of all the ridgetop development. The ridgetop development in itself is a risk because fire travels very quickly uphill, goes a little more slowly downhill, which you'll see shortly. And so being at the top of a ridge isn't the greatest place to be, is part of our past planning legacy. So Ku-ring-gai is, yes, Mark did say, it is the third most vulnerable community to bushfire in New South Wales. And I think we're only exceeded by the Blue Mountains, and I think Sutherland is the other one. So as you can see there, we've got North Turramurra right in the centre of the screen, Wahroonga to the left and Killara to the right, going across to the Wildflower Garden, and Belrose to the north. And we're going to say it's a typical day in summer, but it's an extreme fire weather day. The forecast is for it to be very hot. We've got winds that are going to be strengthening during the day, and it is a time for people to have been, it's actually too late now to start preparing. The preparation needed to be done months, weeks in advance of anything like this day unfolding. So what we're going to do is we're going to work our way through what a catastrophic fire might look like. Something that might have happened back in November in 2019 when we had that catastrophic fire day. So we're going to tell you a little bit about the sim table first. James, do you just want to tell people how this works?
Yes, so if we were in a physical workshop where we were standing around the sim table, what you would normally see is a tray of crushed walnut shell, which we call the sand. So it's a very fine ground crushed walnut shell with no nut material in it. And that's on a tray, as I mentioned. And then above that is a projector and computer. And that projects an image that you see here on top of the crushed walnut shell. And then we get a 3D effect by overlaying the crushed walnut shell, this colorful elevation shading layer. We use this map here to help us shape the sand into the contours of Ku-ring-gai, meaning the purple area is reddish area is low areas like valleys and creeks. The green areas is higher than that, and then the highest areas are again the yellow and orange areas. So that's how we create the terrain, by shaping the sand to match those contours. We turn that layer off, and then we turn on the satellite image, which you can see here, and then you can see a 3D effect. Now, because we're running this via computer, obviously we cannot do, you lose that 3D effect. However, the simulation itself works quite well via Zoom. So how we run the simulation is that we can control the wind speed and wind direction with this dial up at the top left of your screen. By pulling the arrow along to the boundaries of the blue circle, we can increase the wind speed. And by moving the arrow around, we can change the wind direction. So for example, on a typical day, we might be getting a northwesterly wind traveling at, say, maybe 46 kilometers per hour, or fast up to a maximum of 95 kilometers or 96, sorry, is the fastest this simulation can run at. Down below, you'll see various controls. In the middle, you see the play and pause button. We can pause the simulation. Next to it is the speed dial. We control the speed of the simulation. Naturally, we do not want to sit around and watch a fire progress in real time. We don't have enough time for that. So this allows us to speed things up a bit, to move things along. And then next to that, to the right, is a timer. It measures how long the simulation has been running for, and can also tell you how many square kilometers have been burnt. There's a lot more features I can show you here, but those are the main ones that relate to this workshop.
Thanks, James. I have a rather big grey block on the screen. Is that something we can get rid of?
I think it might be to do with my screen share. It's a glitch to do with Zoom. So what I can do, I can stop the screen share and start again, and hopefully that might get rid of it. Just bear with me.
So while James is doing that, I'll tell you, for this scenario, we're saying that it's an extreme weather, or it's a very hot, very dry day forecast, and it's going to be similar in conditions to what we just saw for that Paradise Fire. At this point, Angus, what might RFS be doing in preparation for a day like this?
Thanks, Jenny. So with the weather conditions you described, the RFS would most likely have its units stood up, so already at station with crew, ready to respond to any calls. We would generally be responding at least, on these days, at least 5 tankers or trucks to any reported fire, because we know that if we cannot get it under control in the time, the geography of the landscape means that it'll most likely become inaccessible on catastrophic days, or on the days of highest fire activity. We generally don't send fire appliances down fire trails. It's simply too dangerous for our crews. And like you were saying with the campfire, aerial attack on these bushfires may not be an option either. So we will be standing up, ready to go to cut down on that time it takes us to get there. But on these catastrophic days, it may not be enough.
Right. Thank you, Angus. Now, before we start the simulation, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the ClimateWise Communities website and just show you the very first step that we have in the planning process that you can go through to understand whether or not you're at risk of fire and where you live, and what you might do about that. Now, I'm guessing that most of you probably are exposed to fire, given that you're interested in a bushfire workshop. So when we go into the ClimateWise site, we go into the Ready Check. You can see there's 5 steps to this. You simply start your Ready Check. And agree, so the terms and conditions. And the first step that you'll see here is mapping your location. So what it asks you to do is to put in your address, and it will come up with an outline of your property. And the property that we're going to show you is just one that we randomly pick because it has some colours around it that are interesting. So you can see that these are different colours for different hazards. Now there's a heat vulnerability index map with this, and it shows you different areas in Ku-ring-gai that are exposed to more heat than others, and that very much relates to vegetation cover. So you can have a look at that one at your leisure. It shows you an outline of your property, and if we scroll down a little bit, it will show you the hazards that a particular property is exposed to. So pretty much everybody in Ku-ring-gai is exposed to heat waves and storms. That's a universal risk across our area. Bushfire for this property is an issue, so it's close to the bushland and radiant heat would be an issue. It's also vulnerable to ember attack, as are most of the properties in Ku-ring-gai, which are the sparks coming off the fire and landing in and around houses and igniting the houses on fire. It doesn't have any exit issues, which is great, which means it has more than one way in or out. It is also exposed to flood and, as I said, storm and heat wave. Now, those are all the risks you could plan for, but tonight we're just going to look at the bushfire one. So when you go on to step 2, it looks at your personal situation and how vulnerable you are because of that personal situation. So we'll leave that and go back to our map for just a second. And we're going to start the fire. And we'll say, in this case, it could have been a car accident, could have been a lightning strike from the night before, lots of dry lightning. In fact, in a presentation today, I heard that in the Gosford Mountain area, after they had all that rain that dampened the fire right back and they thought the risk was over, they then had a whole heap more lightning strikes that ignited all new fires, and off it went again. So lightning strikes are a very common reason for these fires to ignite in these types of conditions. The bush is just so dry, it goes up very quickly. So James has started the fire. Not quite. Ah, there he is. There is one. There's the lightning strike. Fire is now quickly establishing itself. Lots of people will be able to see the smoke. So have a think about what it is that you might be doing at this point. It's 8 o'clock on a Tuesday morning. So where are you normally on a Tuesday morning? What are you doing? And how would you deal with the alert that was will go out to that northern side of Ku-ring-gai about a fire having ignited? Angus, what's happening over at RFS?
Thanks, Jenny. So we've received multiple 000 calls for this fire, and we've been dispatching, like I said, at least 5 tankers to this. It's been, I can see down the bottom, an hour and a half. So we would be on scene and making our assessments. This fire is spreading obviously towards the southeast of our region. So we'd be planning on a day like this for setting up our tankers along Bobbin Head Road for property protection, along the North Wahroonga Peninsula. There's no way we'd be sending assets or vehicles rather down the chase trail you can see just to the south, because this fire is growing so rapidly. So assuming of course that the Hornsby Ku-ring-gai district has all of its assets in the region, which it may not. We may have trucks out supporting the Central Coast, supporting the Northern Beaches, supporting Cumberland, supporting the hills. They may have intense fire activity in their areas, so we may not have access to our full chest of resources. That being said, they could also be assisting us. But at this stage, yeah, we would be emptying the deck and pouring everything we have on this in terms of trucks. But it would be pretty much straight into property protection, setting up for that in North Turramurra and North Wahroonga.
Right. Thanks, Angus. Okay, so you can see the yellow part of the fire is the actual fire front, Then the red behind that is the area that's fully involved in fire. And the black, you can see it's slowly going black, is where the fire has burnt all the available fuel on the ground. Now you can see some spot fires have triggered. Mark, what might council be doing at this stage?
We'll be supporting RFS certainly, and we'll have an emergency. Our emergency management team would be up to take calls to provide information to all the media channels. We'll have our media team up promoting things on Facebook and every other media channel we can think of to tell people what's happening. People can also look at fires near me, which RFS keeps updated very, very rapidly during such situations. But the main thing is that you're listening, particularly maybe to ABC radio. That's a very good one to listen to in your area. So it's all preparation, thinking beforehand what you would do. You'd have all your very precious gear in 1 or 2 boxes ready to go if you haven't already left. And we'll talk about leave early afterwards. Because say North Turramurra, we're coming to, the fire will progress towards North Turramurra. That's one way in, one way out. So you don't want to be stuck in that area. Remember, there's smoke as well as embers. So, yep, many things, Jenny.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, so while that fire is burning away there, we again go back to climate-wise communities and have a think about what is our situation. So understanding your situation is vital to making a good bushfire plan, especially determining what the trigger to leave is going to be for your household. So it just goes through your circumstances. Do you live alone or with others? Do you have children or elderly people or people with special needs? Now you'll see every time that James is ticking a box, there's some information coming up about what it might be that you could include in your plan and the sort of things you need to consider if that's your circumstance. And so as we scroll down, there's a whole range of issues that from the research out of Black Saturday, which a lot of this is based on, demonstrated were issues that affected people's ability to evacuate and when they evacuated. So pets in the household is a big one. There's a lot of planning around pets in this particular tool. Whether or not you have your own transport, so you can leave whenever you want, or whether you're reliant on somebody else. English proficiency in the household is a big one. Perhaps your neighbours might not have English as their first language, and it's always good to connect with your neighbours and ensure that they are up to speed with what's going on. Whether or not you own your home or you're a renter may affect how much you can do in the way of making that property more resilient, and conversations you might need to have with the landlord if that's the case. The phone connections, when the power goes down, of course, we don't have landlines anymore through the NBN. And as we saw with the Paradise Fire, the mobile phone system goes down as well quite quickly. And so in that particular instance, you would still have the ABC 702 in Sydney, the emergency broadcaster, and you could be getting information from that source. So as we roll on down, we can save that to a PDF. Council doesn't want to know your circumstances. That's entirely only for your eyes. So you save it to a PDF on your own computer, and then when you move on to the next step, that information is lost off the site. So you can assure yourselves that your information is secure on your computer. Nobody else will have it. So we'll go back and have a look at our fire now and just see what it's doing. So you can see now the fire front is building quite rapidly. Also up there in the left-hand corner is a blue circle, and it's got an arrow inside it. And that allows us to vary both the wind speed and direction. So at the moment, I think it's set at 60 kilometres an hour and it's coming from the northwest. So it's a pretty strong, stiff breeze. You can see that the fire is getting very close to populated areas, and that wind is due to pick up as the day progresses. So Angus, what's happening now with RFS?
Thanks, Jenny. So as soon as this fire started, given the conditions, it would have immediately jumped to emergency warning. And given the potential impact on properties in our area, would most likely still be at emergency warning. We would be deploying trucks along, continuing to deploy trucks along Bobbin Head Road. We would be assisting police and ambulance as best we can, but realistically with Bobbin Head Road, especially with these upcoming spot fires, that road would basically become a car park, in my opinion. Definitely no one being able to return to their properties to collect anything. You can see our station at Golden Jubilee Field there is probably about to come under impact soon, shortly as well. So this fire's been burning for approximately 15 hours. We'd be having to deal with things like shift changes, redeploying crews, because given the conditions, of course, they've also been working hard for the last 12 hours. And with the fire approaching properties, given the conditions as well as high winds, most likely our backburning operations would not be suitable in these conditions, which are pretty much our tool of last resort, if you like, where we light a fire on a trail or off a property to pre-burn those fuels in front. So we would not have enough trucks, simply put, for all these properties, especially given the long line of properties along Bobbin Head Road, along the peninsula. So we would be, in essence, protecting assets that are protectable. You know, if we pull up to a street and there are 5 houses about to be impacted by fire, and we only have 1 fire truck, unfortunately, we have to make the decision that we have to try and save the most defendable. It might be it's a pretty bad choice to have to make, but we have to try and save what we can as much as we can.
Right, thank you, Angus. Yes, so as Angus was saying, that Bobbin Head Road would pretty much be a car park at this point. But the way to avoid it becoming a car park is for people to leave early. The ideal thing for areas that have only one way in and out, and there are a lot of them in Ku-ring-gai, North Taramara is just one of them, is to not be there when the fire starts. So if you've got a catastrophic or extreme fire day on conditions like this, it's a good idea to plan not to be there, to go out for the day and return later if everything is nice and safe and there's no fire in the immediate area. The last thing you want to do is what happened in Paradise, and that's to be sitting in your car, unable to go forwards or backwards when the fire approaches. Now you can see one of the spot fires is about to compromise that Bobbin Head Road anyway. So the message that we very strongly put across to people to avoid this kind of situation is leave early. We can't emphasize that enough. Stay and defend, if it is an option for you, is something that more than a few people regret by the time the fire has finished. So we'll have a look at how do we know whether or not our property is up to scratch for a fire, and whether or not stay and defend is a reasonable option or a bit of a suicide mission. Now, of course, much of it will depend on whether or not your household circumstances dictate that you are physically fit enough, that you have the resources that you need, that you don't have vulnerable people in your household, that you've got your pets out of the picture, and that you're both mentally resilient as well as physically resilient to be able to deal with a very extreme circumstance. So I'll just quickly go over to climate-wise communities, and we'll look at the next section, which is the property section. When we work through this section, the first thing we suggest people do is do a bit of a mud map of their property and just highlight the features on the property and whether or not they are something that is could be utilised for firefighting or defence, or whether or not it makes you more vulnerable. So it's a risk for your property. For example, timber decks. In this particular image, we've got a timber deck out the back. We've got a line of trees up beside the house, all perfect for ignition. We've got easy access out, and we've got a water resource. Now, there will be different features about the house itself, which also indicate how much of a risk it is, but it's very close to bushland, as you can see from that diagram. So we're going to go through, or you are, I should say, your house, every little feature about it, and determine whether or not it's a risk. We click on the bushfire button, and you can see here, if it comes up as red, it is a weakness. If it comes up as green, then it's more resilient. It's an advantage. And then scale in between. So as we go down, we have a look at, for example, the roof. So what's the design of the roof and what's it made of? So if it's, in this case, a very complicated roof line with lots of valleys and gables and places where leaves and embers can collect, then it's a risk. If it's a simple building with a very straightforward roof with no re-entrant corners and those little nooks and crannies, then that's much more resilient. And again, the material of the roof, it's old metal or old timber shingles. If it's a tile pre-1980 with gaps and mortar that's fracturing, again, that's a place where embers can get into the roof, and it is a risk. But if you've got a metal with no gaps, then that's much more secure and more likely to be a safer house in a bushfire. Bear in mind, no house is 100% guaranteed to be safe. In catastrophic fire conditions, every house can burn down. But if we use these simple guides, then we can make our house as resilient as possible. So as we scroll down through this section, we won't stop on every single section, but it goes through your features of your property bit by bit, looking at all the different areas where it is a strength, where it is a weakness. Gutters and downpipes and fascias and walls, the type, again, material and the way it's constructed. Windows and window frames are very vulnerable places, as are external doors. Somewhere down here, there's about having a door mat and whether or not that door mat is made of flammable material. We look at the floor and the subfloor space because that's another place where embers can ignite any material that's being collected. And if you're like my family and store things under the house, then you could find that's a source for ignition. Verandas and decking, very obvious places. And the outdoor areas, we look at the landscaping and how you can make that more resilient. What is a well-landscaped garden for bushfire compared to one that isn't. And also, as you click on these boxes, you'll notice there's a little line where you can get more information. So you can click on that, it will take you to an external site where there is good information about that particular feature. It scrolls on down and we go through all the different aspects of your property. And at the end of it, you're able to determine for yourselves just how resilient or vulnerable your property is. If you've got lots of red and orange boxes ticked, then it's definitely not the sort of place you want to be in a fire. If you've got blue and green, then that should make you feel a little bit more confident about leaving that property without being defended. You can have some confidence that it might still be standing when you go back to it. So it just quickly here, you'll see there's this one that says bushfire attack level and talks about flame zone and bell ratings. Mark, would you like to just quickly describe what those mean?
Yes, the bell ratings, they work from bell low right through to bell flame zone called bell FZ. And that's actually based on what's called fire line intensity, ranging from about 3 kilowatts, 1,000 kilowatts per square metre through to about 100 kilowatts per square metre. And the human body for about 3 or 4 minutes can only tolerate 2 to 3 kilowatts per square metre. So it shows you how drastic the effects from heat are. So it's really a heat level up against the walls of your house. So bell low is probably not in a bushfire prone area, whereas bell 29, once you reach bell 29, it's getting pretty strong. So a lot of houses in bushfire areas, they have to be a minimum today of bell 29 through to bell 40 to bell flame zone. That's where the flames will come up against your house. And as I just put on the chat, CFA Victoria produces a wonderful freebie on the web, how to retrofit your house to different levels to upgrade. So the key is to upgrade to each higher bell level. That will give you better protection for your house. A lot on the web on it. Thanks.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, so again, all this information can be saved to a PDF. Also, we'll highlight that little tab over there on the right-hand side that says Ask an Expert. If you want more information about your particular circumstance, you can write a question and we can send that to one of the expert people we have who have agreed to answer questions. We have bushfire architects and Windows Association and a whole range of people, including RFS, who can answer specific questions. Okay, so we go back now to our fire. We'll see where it's at. Now you can see it's penetrated very deeply into the community. So Angus, what's happening with RFS now?
So thanks, Jenny. So yeah, like I was saying before, this we can see that it's starting to impact the top of St Ives Chase. We would be probably we'd probably be shifting our focus to St Ives Chase. Given the intensity in the North Turramurra area, I would be extremely surprised if we haven't lost multiple homes. Our overall priority is always the protection of life, whether that's our lives as firefighters, but also the community. So we would be definitely prioritising that in the St Ives Chase and then through the North Ku-ring-gai area as it works its way up these little valleys. We would be potentially going from house to house, seeing what is defendable, and if a house is not defendable, we may unfortunately have to move to the next one, because we will never have, the reality is we will never have enough fire trucks to protect all these houses.
Yes, and I think that's a really important message. Thanks, Angus. Be prepared to be on your own. Don't rely on the fact that a fire truck is going to be at your doorstep to defend your property. In this kind of a scale of fire, it's a very strong likelihood that that won't be the case. Because quite often on these days, this won't be the only fire burning in New South Wales. It's very likely there are many other fires burning and resources will be stretched thin. So this is what we want you to plan for. To be alone, to be able to make your own decisions, to get information when you need it and know where to source that information, to connect with your neighbours is especially important, and work out how you can work together. All needs to be done well in advance. Once the fire hits, of course, that's way too late. So we'll just quickly flick back to Climate Wise, and we'll, on the topic of neighbours, just think about how we can help each other to make our neighbourhood more resilient for these kind of events. And this is just simply about mapping your neighbourhood, knowing where the resources might be that you can call on for assistance, but also knowing where there might be people who will need assistance. Perhaps you know people who don't have their own transport, or someone who is elderly and may not be aware that there is a fire, or may not be able to evacuate themselves and perhaps their pet. So the more we can get neighbourhoods to combine together and work together about how to be prepared for these kinds of events, the better off we will be, and importantly, the easier the recovery will be afterwards. So this just again is a series of questions about how well you know your neighbourhood and how much preparation that you could do with your neighbours. Now, this is one of the sections in Climate Wise Communities 2.0 that we are in the process of improving. So we hope to have this tool will have developed much further next year. So as we scroll down through it, it just talks about whether or not you can access your neighbour's place if you need to get through there. Knowing the kinds of people who are around you and connecting with them and working with them to work out a plan well in advance of any of these events ever happening, so that when they do happen, you might have even rehearsed a few times how you would handle this kind of event, and it should run smoothly on the day if you have. Then again, catering for those people who aren't normally at home on a Tuesday, maybe there's nobody home, and they more than likely won't be allowed back into the street, and they might have pets. Now, I've heard many a heartbroken resident talking about they couldn't get back to save their pets. And I can tell you that psychological impact that kind of thing, amongst many things, can have on people over time. And it's no small thing. So planning for pets, whether or not there's someone there, and if there isn't anyone there, how they might be evacuated and get them out. So that's all part and parcel of how you work with your neighbours. You know, it might be that the kids are at home, your teenagers are at home, you're not home from work yet. How might they get out? They're not going to have the transport. So you might predict that that could be a problem and work with your neighbours to help solve that eventuality. So there we have all this range of issues that you can talk about with your neighbours, and maybe get together and if you want to run a neighbourhood workshop in your area. I know that there are some RFS still does those street meets. They will come down and have a chat to your neighbourhood. And we run Climate Wise Communities workshops in different neighbourhoods from time to time, and you can request a workshop if that's what you'd like. When COVID's over, it will be much easier to do. So there's all those questions and that section for you to ponder over about with your neighbours as to how you might work together to see how your little community can function in a disaster. So that brings us to when you fill in your plan. Now, we give you a couple of links when we go to step 5. Oh no, there they are. There's the couple of links. So James, you can just scroll back up a bit. So for bushfire, you can go to the RFS and they will, oh, that's not where we are, so we're not there yet. So that's all the digital prepared links that you can go to. In this step 5, we have the links to the plans. So for the bushfire, we look at RFS's plans. For storms, SES has a plan. Red Cross covers heat waves, as well as multiple disasters. Red Cross is quite good for some specialty groups. Seniors living alone, for example, they have a special planning tool for them. And Carers Australia, if you are a carer for people, they have a plan for those situations. So the bushfire survival plan needs to be very well informed by very good information to make it effective. And if you go through this planning process, the idea is that you'll have plenty of good information to inform that plan. Again, it's all saved to a PDF. So we flash back to what that catastrophic fire is doing now and how far it's progressed. And you can see the wind is still howling from the northwest, driving it deeper and deeper into the suburbs of Ku-ring-gai. So there'll be more and more areas that are being subject to impact now. So I know national parks, Mark, you might like to comment on this. The national parks would certainly have their firefighting teams deployed as well, wouldn't they?
Certainly around northern Sydney, they've got about 6 to 7 units easily. And as well as doing hazard reductions, like they're doing them for the next 5 years, they're planned all over that northern boundary, the northern interface. So they'll have their units out also to work with RFS. And Ku-ring-gai actually has one unit as well. So yeah, it's sort of all in to share the load, to work together. So yep.
So it's a multiple agency response. And as I said before, under the shared responsibility model that we work under, it is one where if everybody takes a little bit of the load, then the best outcomes can be achieved. So there's always going to be losses of one kind or another in these scales of events. But the more we're prepared, the more we can reduce those losses. Okay, so Angus, you want to add anything at this point?
Thanks, Jenny. I'd just like to add that this kind of event, the fact that we're simulating it in this time, I mean, you can see that this has only been going on for under 2 days, you know, a day and a half, roughly a day and 13 hours. We would be responding there quite quickly on a day that we would have our crews stood up, but the long-term plan for this fire would still be very much in its infancy. We would have our teams of incident controllers and incident management stood up, but for this kind of campaign fire, we would probably still be getting our plans in place, because this kind of scale of event, coupled with the fact that this is most likely taking place in other parts of the state as well, you know, Ku-ring-gai would be in it for the long haul. It's not just a day or two and, you know, the fire's all out and we can go back to normal. There will be many days of clearing out hotspots, reignitions in places, given these prevailing winds and temperatures. This would be an event in the response level for many weeks.
Yes, certainly would be. Thank you. Okay, so what happens often on a summer's day or in a summer period is that the wind changes direction. Sometimes late in the afternoon, we get a southerly buster in these hot days, and we'll just see how the fire reacts to that change in direction. Now you can see James has swung the arrow around on the wheel to face north, meaning the wind is now coming from the south. And we've got it gusting at the maximum capacity of 90 kilometres an hour. Now, if you look at the way the fire is behaving, there's a very dramatic shift in the way the fire front is running. It immediately responds to the change in weather conditions and it starts heading north, which in some respects is a good thing. But if you look lower down, you can see that in areas the fire has turned back on itself and put itself out. But in other areas, because of the terrain, it's burning whole new sets of houses. So it's now penetrating deep into the Hornsby Shire. And obviously it's the highway, the Pacific Highway would be cut off, as would the M1. And there'd be no traffic going through there, nor would the rail line be operating probably since the fire started. But the people in Belrose now and to the north there, the Northern Beaches Council area, they would certainly be in the firing line. And so they would be looking at being prepared now. So you can see how quickly, with the shift of the wind, how these fires can change. And that fire would now be, when it hits the tops of ridges, be spotting across to those northern suburbs and setting up an even more dramatic fire front. You can see it's a huge fire front now. It's many kilometres long. That whole fire front will join up and keep burning as long as there's fuel on the ground. So that's the fire, and we want you to bear that in mind. Now, really, this is just one of 1,000 ways this fire could unfold. There are so many variables that occur in these fires. We don't know where the spot fires will occur. We don't know exactly how the winds will shift. We don't know how the fire will behave because, as you know from Black Summer, they got fire tornadoes. They got random events that completely, out of the textbook of firefighting. And some of these were occurring at night when traditionally the fires are dampening down and quietening down. That didn't happen a lot of the time in the last lot of fires. RFS, want to comment on that at all?
Sam, do you want to take that?
I think the fire season that we've just gone through, the Black Summer, it was, the word unprecedented is bandied around a lot, but most of us have never seen anything like it. It burnt as hot at night as it did during the day, and areas that had burnt 4 weeks prior, again, burnt through the crowns of the trees. So I just can't overemphasize being prepared to go and having a clear trigger point, which for most of Ku-ring-gai, with the risk that we would face at a fire of this kind of level, is when you receive a watch and act for your watch zone for your home on fires near me, that's when you put your fire plan into place and you decide to leave then. Because it's very likely what we see on the screen at the moment, it shows the fire front, but there will also be intense ember storms. That most of this area will be completely covered in thick, dark smoke, and you just don't want to be there. I just can't emphasize enough that, as much as we would like to save your home and your property, we just can't be everywhere, and your safety should be your first priority. So leave early, please.
Great. Thanks, Sarah, for that. Okay, now having shown you the worst of the worst, we've seen there is a lot the householder can do to better their circumstances in the face of this kind of an event. We'll just go back to our Climate-Wise Communities tool. Now, the last thing we include in this process is a tool that again came out of Black Saturday, where they looked at the number of people who had bushfire survival plans, and that was less than 5% of the people who were impacted by that fire, and how many of them had a plan that worked on the day. And universally, everybody who had a plan said it didn't work on the day. And the reason it didn't work on the day was because the fire didn't happen the way they anticipated that it would. And their plan didn't have contingencies in it to allow them to draw on alternatives when their first plan failed. So what this does, and we do emphasize this with climate-wise communities, is that you need to think about these contingencies. They happen often, and you need to know what you're going to do if that happens to you when the fire approaches your property. Now, this is not the full selection. This is just a few of the more common ones. So think about the kinds of things that could potentially go wrong and think about how your plan might deal with that. So you have those alternatives in place and rehearsed and well thought through and communicated to the people around you so that you all know what happens if the first plan doesn't work. So what you do is, with this one, is that you spin the wheel and it's going to randomly land on one of these things that happen. And you can see then how you're going to deal with that if it happens to you. So in this particular instance, these people have a family dog, it's part of the family. It's gone missing. It knows the fire's coming, so it's gone and retreated somewhere and it's not coming out. So how might you deal with that kind of a situation? And basically the RSPCA and other agencies who deal with pets say, long before the fire front gets anywhere near your house, you should have your pet in its carrier, not necessarily in the car because it'll be too hot, but in some kind of secure place or its carrier, so that particularly carriers for cats, so that you can easily retrieve the animal and get it in the car when your trigger to leave happens. So that's the kind of thing that has happened. Now another one, we'll spin it again. Away it
And we have a
goes.
question from a resident. Marg Woods would like to ask a question at this point.
Okay, we'll come to the question in just a second. We'll just look at one more of these. You're unsure whether to leave. Okay, if you create a trigger to leave, you need to observe that trigger to leave. What a lot of people did in Black Saturday, they had a trigger to leave, and when the time came, they said, I'll just wait a bit longer. And then they left it too late. So have a trigger to leave, and that might well be the morning of the hot weather day, okay? Particularly if you're not going to stay and defend, then get out early and stay out until you know there's no risk. Okay, so that takes us through climate-wise communities. It takes us through our fire. I'm just going to give the agencies, everybody, a chance to have a final word, and then we'll go to questions. So perhaps if we start with Mark at the top, final messages that you'd like people to remember?
Just remember, I think that in Australia, over 85% of all house loss is due to embers, not from the radiant heat from your adjoining bushland. So embers, even in the middle of Gordon, the urban centre, embers can drift up the hills there in strong winds. So really, as I see it, having walked a lot of Ku-ring-gai now, most of the houses would be prone to ember attacks. So really, that's a huge issue. I do want to really emphasise that. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I think Canberra demonstrated that very well. Okay, RFS. Messages you'd like people to remember?
Hi everyone. I think the one message I'd ask is to everyone to download Fires Near Me and set up your watch zones. Set one up for yourself, set one up for your brother, your sister, your parents. You can set up to 10, I think. And that also means that if your mother lives in the Central Coast, you know what her area is doing. And also listen to the ABC National Radio. They are our national emergency channel. So if your phone dies, you can still get updates through the radio.
Great. Thank you, Michelle.
Thanks.
Sam?
I'll let Angus do this.
Okay. Angus.
Thanks, Jenny. No, I think Michelle absolutely hit the nail on the head with that. It's that getting informed and then staying informed. The Fires Near Me app, every time the fire boundary changes or the alert level for a fire changes, it'll send you another notification. And that's a great tool to have, but don't make that your only one. Make sure you have a radio, battery powered. That'd be fantastic in case the power goes down. Having access to water in case the water pressure in your street drops, because that's the first thing that will happen if the RFS rock up, is we'll need that water out of the mains and your water pressure will drop. Thinking about the what ifs and really going back to that Ku-ring-gai Council wheel of what will I do if this happens, and making sure that you second guess every decision that you think you're going to make, and having that plan there so that you don't have to be making these split-second decisions under pressure in these during these bushfire events, is having that plan that you've sat down and thought of with your friends and with your family, and just having to be able to go off that instead of having to make those split-second decisions.
Great. Thank you, Angus. Okay, James, we'll go over to you for questions.
Just before we do that, I'd like to just cover off on one other thing. It's relates to the comment that Mark put in the chat about retrofitting the home to make your house better prepared for bushfire season. Climate-wise community, Ku-ring-gai Council, had a rebate program available to residents of Ku-ring-gai to help them retrofit their homes to the risk of ember attack and radiant heat and flame attack. So this rebate is available to anyone living on the bushfire prone land, as well as mapped ember attack zones. So what's on offer to residents is a rebate of $1,500. The rebate's broken up into two main parts, which is the $1,000 maximum for retrofits, and then the $500 maximum is for helping with any DA or CDC application fees. So how the rebate works is that if you get some retrofit work done, council can give you a rebate worth 25% of the work that you do, up to a maximum of $1,000, and the same thing goes for the CDC and DA fees. For example, if you have to do a CDC or DA for a new bushfire windows or replacement windows on your house, you need to apply for a CDC or a DA for that, and we can cover up to 50% of those costs, up to a maximum of $500. So the process to get the rebate is fairly straightforward. It's broken up into three main steps, and you can find information on how to do that on the Ku-ring-gai Council webpage. If you just search for bushfire retrofits or bushfire wise rebates, you will get to this page here. So in order to get the rebate, you have to submit a pre-approval. You can see that is the first green box down there, green button. You click that button and it takes you to an online form where you can fill in your details and get your application made there. You need to upload 2 documents as part of your retrofit, as part of your application. You'll need to complete step 3 of the ReadyCheck tool, which Jenny went through. You can get that on the Climate-wise Community's website. And you'll need to download the RFS Bushfire Survival Plan from their website. And you complete that bushfire plan and upload that as part of your pre-approval application. When your application gets sent through to me, I will liaise with you about your application and make sure that what you're doing will actually help you or qualifies for the program. And then I'll give you a pre-approval number and you can go away and do the work. And once you get the work done, you come back to the same webpage, click submit your final application, and then you can upload your photographs of the work done, invoices, and proof of completion. And then I will issue the rebate based on how much money you spent on that retrofit. Now, the items that you can that will qualify for a rebate will be things like improving the roof, replacing ridge cap mortar, installing fireproof sarking, replacing those flimsy acrylic skylights with tough glass skylights, and covering up roof vents with end-proof mesh. And you can go down a list of things you can do. So there's quite a lot you can do. And the good thing about that is that most of the work that as Mark mentioned, most houses are vulnerable to ember attack, and preventing ember attack from burning down your house is fairly cheap and easy to do. So you don't necessarily have to go down the route of bushfire shutters and expensive sort of double bushfire proof windows. A lot of things you can do are fairly cheap and affordable. So I'll end it there and hand back to stop my screen shares and start the Q&A session. So I believe, Marg, you have a question. Could you please type your question into the Q&A box and I'll read that out. I think it's easier like that with a group this large. So as you can see, we have a Q&A function at the bottom or to the top of your screen. So just put the questions in there. We will answer them for you. Hello, Marg, would you like to, I think the Q&A is not working right now. So Marg, would you like to ask a question? You need to unmute your microphone to ask a question.
Hi, I think I'm talking. Yes, you can hear me.
Yes, you are, Marg.
Okay, I wasn't sure if anybody else was called that. I'm a wildlife carer and we have wildlife in care here as well as pets. So evacuation sometimes is quite difficult to take so many animals. Where can you evacuate wildlife to?
Okay, this is for me, I think, because I'm also in wires. Evacuating wildlife is quite hard, as I'm sure you've thought about, because of the number of animals and the number of cages you would need and the number of carriers. Yeah. You could use the neighbourhood safety zones, but they're a last resort. They're really not a great idea. It is best to work with your network of other carers and see if there's someone else's house you could go to and keep the animals either in a shaded garage or out in other cages there. I would be networking within your group. You can go to shopping centres if they have underground car parks, because at least then your car is in shade. But you have to make sure obviously that there's water and you take food and browse, because the roads will be clogged. You won't be able to get out to get browse for possums. You'd have to take food for what other animals you've got. So I'd recommend networking through your group and seeing if there's another carer that lives further away that you could be a buddy for, and taking the animals to their place until you know what's happening.
Thank you. That's what we've sort of set that up. Yep. So there's a whole lot of snakes going to come to my house because I'm further away with them from fires. So yeah, fine.
Lucky
Thank you very much.
That's okay.
We have another question from Nancy Lee. What additional items would you add to an emergency survival kit other than what's listed in the New South Wales Rural Fire Service website? Would you recommend a mask or a fire blanket, for example? Fire blanket. So
definitely a fire blanket. They're almost a must if you live along the interface. That's for sure. I'll let RFS, our good people, answer any more on that.
I think a P2 rated mask is something that could definitely come in very handy. At least a P2 rated mask during those ember attacks, and then also with that heavy smoke that we're likely to experience in a bushfire event. happy to let Michelle or Sam jump in, but that list we have on our website is quite good. I would caution and say that maybe just think about what you need to survive the first 24 hours alone. If you have to run out the door right now, you know, the first 24 hours, the next 24 hours, because it can vary from household to household, depending on pets, depending on your profession, depending on how many members of your household there are. So that list tries to encompass everyone and be quite broad. One hint I would give is probably absolutely is to have a copy of all of your identification, such as all your health records, all of your house records, all of your licenses. If not the original copy, then maybe a scanned copy on a USB, and all of your medication scripts and a copy of your meds as well. That would be my hint.
I'd also include food for your pets and your pet's medication in that.
I'd also like to add in there children. And now, obviously, you need to think about what you need to pack for your children, but also think about maybe engaging your children on what they would want to take with them. Involve them in the planning process, allow them to contribute to what they can put in their emergency kit, because fires can be very stressful and very upsetting, and the lasting sort of effects of having to evacuate can be quite profound on children. So by involving them in the planning process, you can actually mitigate or also minimize the PTSD they might suffer from a bushfire event, and give them agency over what happens to them. Also, they know they're experts in their own life, so they all know what they want to take in terms of keepsakes, dolls, toys, the kind of things which help anchor them in their safe place. So if they're in a evacuation center or they have to stay somewhere unfamiliar and they're a bit scared, what they can take with them can help them feel calm and settle and help them sleep and stay, you know, and sort of give them something to hold on to. So definitely involve your children in the planning process. And if you don't have children, or maybe you might have grandchildren or nieces and nephews, talk to the parents and of course, if they live in bushfire prone areas, of course, and sort of pass on that message to help them and to encourage them to get the children involved in the planning process as well, because I think children can be quite surprising in their capability to take an active role in planning for bushfires and other natural disasters too. So if anyone would like to ask any more questions, please feel free. We have another one, a follow-up question from Nancy. May you recommend a good fire blanket brand? Now, I don't think we can, council can't, but maybe someone else can. No.
It's a good question. I would just investigate the kind of material that it's made out of, and certainly cotton wouldn't be a bad bet. Something that's not synthetic, and depending on the thickness and size as well to suit your needs. I think they're all blankets sold under the name of fire blanket would have to meet an Australian standard, definitely. So I would just keep that in mind looking through them.
This is I'm not an expert in this myself, but this is my question to Sam, to the RFS guys, Angus, Michelle, and Sam. In a pinch, could you just grab the fire blanket from the kitchen?
Yes, in a pinch, but it's usually pretty small. So that's to Angus's point. You can get different sizes, but as Angus said, anything natural fibers like wool and cotton don't burn, and that's why wool is so good. So if you have wool, it's a good thing to have around. Any old woolen blanket will help.
Would fiberglass be a material you would want to use? No?
I would stick with natural fibers personally.
I think there's also a distinction between the fire blanket and something you'd use in a kitchen, and something you'd also use as a thermal shield in a bushfire. Yep. So the ones in the kitchen are generally much smaller. That's a whole nother issue in terms of how you deploy them in a kitchen fire, but certainly they both accomplish the same thing, even though they are different sizes.
Yeah.
Now I know the question to this answer. I know the answer to this question, but just for the benefit of the audience, would you wet down any material to stay cool if you need to escape a house? I know the answer to this one, but I thought it's something which pops up every now and then. Would you wet a
I can
blanket, for
answer
example?
this one. Yeah, if you were required to shelter in place, I think a wet woolen blanket would be a really good bet. Having said that, if you have water available to you, carrying around a wet woolen blanket isn't going to be very comfortable if it's going into the car, but there are worse things.
Are there any more? Oh, okay. You're welcome, Nancy. Yeah, that was a thank you from Nancy. Are there any other questions from the attendees? We still have a bit of time left. Still
I
quite
just
early.
thought of something we haven't addressed is if you are sheltering in place, where in the house would you shelter in place, Angus? Or Sam?
Yeah,
Or
really,
whoever?
really good point, Jenny. Ideally, you want to be in the opposite side of the house to the side of the house that's currently getting impacted by fire. So if the back of your property, if your property backs down onto the bush, rather, you probably want to be in the front side of your property, because then you have that thermal shielding of your house once it's being impacted. But you've also got to consider your exit points, and once that fire front passes and it is safe to get out of the house, because it may well be on fire, that ability to get out of the house quickly is also something to consider.
Great.
A question that normally comes up during our workshops, in the physical workshops, is the hazard reduction burns. Now, I'm sure everyone in the past few weeks or a while ago, there was quite a few hazard reduction burns going on, and there was full of smoke. So that was a good reminder to everyone that the bushfire season is upon us. This question, the question I want to ask is, when that comes up all the time, is often a request to have more hazard reduction burns around where residents live, and are hazard reduction burns a panacea as for bushfire risk, or is there more to it? Or is it more of a complex issue when it comes to reducing bushfire hazard in the landscape? So I think this will maybe pass on to Mark for this one, and then
Definitely.
again, RFS, you guys can jump in.
Yeah, actually, James and everyone, I've spent, I think, 15 years trying to work this one out. In some respects, you've got many people say prescribed burning is the way to go. There's a large group of people now who say with climate change, the prescribed burns over time, the next 10 to 20 years, will have less and less effect, so to speak, on reducing real risk. And there's advocates between the two camps also, if we call it that. Certainly, Ross Bradstock's school down at University of Wollongong has really found that 100 metres in from your house along the interface, if you are going to burn, is the most effective way to do it. Now, the only issue that comes up then, if we have frequent burning along the interface, we'll lose a lot of biodiversity. Actually, they become like sacrificial zones almost, and you get things like edge effects coming in. So you get invasive animals, more ferals coming in, all that type of thing. But you've got to try and weigh up, is the protection side a priority compared to the biodiversity side? When can you fit the two together? We have, it was mentioned before, the Hornsby Ku-ring-gai Bushfire Management Committee. Ku-ring-gai with RFS and Fire and Rescue sits on that, and they have what's called recommended fire regimes, a minimum and a maximum number of burns in a certain time you do. And that's for both the biodiversity and for asset protection. So we try and work to a formula based on different vegetation and ecological types. It's a hard one because around many areas of New South Wales, we're lacking a lot of long unburnt areas. Too frequently burning can cause issues, even though it might reduce fuel. And as I said before, if you have strong winds, even after 2 to 3 years after a burn, you will still get a fire carrying through. So it's no guarantee. Really, hazard reduction burns have the use, but in extreme fire weather, less usefulness. So yeah, it's a hard one. I never stop thinking about it 24 hours a day. Thanks.
I think Justin Leonard from CSIRO, he did a presentation about why houses burn down during bushfires. and he said that most of the houses that burned down during a bushfire burned down during catastrophic conditions. And in those conditions, I think the benefit of hazard reduction burns is reduced due to just the severity of the conditions, high winds, low humidity, extremely dry fuels, and leads to an extremely intense fire. So I'm sure Sam, Michelle, and Angus could spend quite a long time talking about what it's like fighting fire on catastrophic fire danger days.
Long.
Long and hot.
Hot, long, tired. I've been with the RFS for 3 years, like Angus. I think Sam's got a lot more experience with that, but just the scale of it surprises you, and how fast it can move.
The fact that no structure is built to survive a catastrophic fire condition day certainly weighs in the back of your mind. That even when you pull up to these properties with beautifully mown grass, all of the gutters are clear, they've done everything right, on that catastrophic day, that property is still, from our doctrine, not able to survive in those conditions.
Yeah. And that's a very good segue to a question, anonymous question, a question about the fire blanket issue. On catastrophic bushfire danger days, if you happen to live in bushfire-prone areas with limited options for escape, you should definitely not be there. I live in an area that has limited exits out, and my bushfire survival plan dictates that myself and my family are not here on a bushfire danger day of that scale, on a catastrophic bushfire danger day. I'm not here. I'm with my father, or I'm down by the beach having a swim. I'm not in this in the danger zone.
Yep.
So the question we had here goes back to the bushfire, back to the fire blanket. And the question is, why would we suggest a fire blanket to escape a house if it's on fire? Surely you'll be gone by then. And that is a very good point. I think everyone would agree that a leave early plan is always the best. However, sometimes, but Sam would like to follow up to comment on that.
I would. The South Turramurra fire, whilst that did end well for a catastrophic day fire, it went from an alert to emergency warning shelter in place. And whilst the best laid plans and a really good fire plan will have you leave early, and the opportunity to leave at either an alert or a watch and act level, sometimes you don't get that opportunity, and actually being prepared to protect yourself is the best option you have. We would prefer that everybody left early every time, but sometimes that's not what you are given the opportunity to do. So I think just being prepared for the worst case scenario is always a good idea.
I think just to add on to that as well with the fire blanket, certainly when the fire front passes, and like I was saying before, the fire front may pass and your house may be your life. There may still be that intense radiant heat outside. So if you need to leave, much like our firefighting gear, you want as much protection from that thermal radiation and heat as you can get, especially when you're exiting into what may be pretty intense conditions outside.
And this also leads back to the what if wheel that we demonstrated earlier. You might have a leave early plan and you might have done everything right. However, random scenarios could happen, just as we saw on the what if wheel. A tree could fall down, your car might not start for some random reason, you might lose your keys in a panic to leave the house, your pet might have gone missing. So there could be many reasons or many situations where you might not have been able to initiate your leave early plan, or maybe you just didn't get the information soon enough to initiate your leave early plan. You couldn't find yourself stuck. During catastrophic conditions, it could be very windy and trees could be blown across the road. There could be traffic jams. So you might find yourself in a situation where you might need to go back to your house and shelter in place. Everyone's situation is different. So it's always worthwhile planning for the unexpected. And this is where we advise you to make a plan and test it with the what if wheel to make sure you can cover on all those scenarios. So the other question is, where do you hide in your house with a blanket over your head? Who would like to take that one? Angus?
I can tell you, like going back to the previous answer somewhat, but you don't want to be on the side of the house that the fire is currently impacting. It may well start on one side and then work its way around the house into the back. So definitely initially, I'd like to be on the opposite side of the house from that initial impact. If you have that luxury of it only impacting one side of the house, but if you certainly as close to an exit as you can, planning in your head how you're going to get out of the house, much like we do with structural fires, that kind of get down low and go scenario. How easy is it going to be for you to exit the house if it starts filling with smoke, and are you going to know your way out? So somewhere where you're confident of being able to exit, and then having that radiant heat protection from the structure as well.
So definitely not a toilet then as well.
No.
So that comes up
One other
quite a
thing
lot.
to add, yeah, being able to see outside and having more than one exit from that room is more than ideal. You want to be able to see when the fire front is passed, and you don't want to be in an enclosed room, say like a toilet, where you would not be able to get out of the window there. Well, I know I wouldn't be able to. Most windows are too small in a toilet room. So perhaps a laundry with an external door if it was in the right aspect of the home for the fire front. Each home is different. And this is all something that should be part of your fire plan. So you've thought about it before the time comes to have to make that decision.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Sam. So are there any other questions? I think we've, or everyone else, are there any other questions that pop up during other workshops that would like to sort of cover off on now, seeing as we don't have any questions in the Q&A?
We often get a question about the static water source signs, the SWS signs or stickers outside a property. So they indicate a static water source, so like a pool or a dam, and that indicates for our firefighting resources that there is a place where we can draft water into our trucks, so we don't have to rely on the town water, on the hydrants. In Ku-ring-gai, most of the area is covered by is fire rescue territory, so they're the ones to distribute those signs. So contacting your local fire and rescue brigade. Most of ours would either be Hornsby or Gordon. So we at Ku-ring-gai Brigade don't have the capacity at the moment to distribute those, but certainly they're a great asset when we pull up to a house or a street and we need to have that certain water supply for our trucks.
And getting a rainwater tank is part of the Climate-Wise Communities, the Bushfire-Wise rebate program. So if you want to get a metal tank with a stores fitting that would allow the RFS to connect to it, you can get a rebate for that. We also have a water smart rebate program, which covers rainwater tanks as well. So I manage both programs. So if you're interested in getting a rainwater tank, I'll try and figure out which one is most appropriate for you, which rebate is most appropriate for you. So the other question we have is, how do you open a door if it's too hot to open?
A wet woolen blanket, I reckon, would be a good idea.
I would have thought a dry oven mitt, because I've taken things out of the oven with a wet dish towel once, and it didn't work out well.
I'm just wondering if you actually want to open a door if the handle's too hot.
No, I wouldn't have thought so.
If the handle of the door itself is hot, that probably indicates that the smoke layer behind the door is at least as low as the handle, and that's quite a dangerous situation to open that door. You may get a flashover from that. So I would question the necessity to open that door. If it's not your last option, I wouldn't be doing it.
What if the firefight had passed from one side of the house to the other, and you're on the lee on the other side of the house? It's potentially that the handle could still be hot then, And if the firefighter had passed, would that be okay then to open the door, even if it's quite hot?
Yeah, especially if it's door to outside, then that's a separate thing. It's a door to just, if it's your front door, then certainly. But if it's another internal door and it's getting that hot, obviously this depends on your visibility as well. If you're in a room with great visibility around your property and you can see what's happening, that's obviously a better situation to be in with this. But yeah, for those internal doors, I'd be questioning that.
This might be a good segue into another question regarding like sort of fires inside the house and that. Draft proofing your house could be a very good move to do in case you are stuck, because that could limit the amount of smoke entering the house, and smoke entering the house could make it very hard to breathe and can be quite risky. So it's always good practice to draft proof your house as a preventative measure to stop embers from entering the house as well as smoke. And it's another good thing that pops up in workshops quite often is the fact that if you are forced to shelter in place and you're not able to leave early, and you're stuck in your house, your roof could be on fire, you might not know about it. So, a surprisingly effective weapon against embers entering your house is a super soaker. So I think some people recommend having a super soaker in place just above the hatch so that you can periodically pop your head into the roof space, check for embers, and if the embers have entered that roof, you can actually squirt them with a super soaker and refill it with water saved in your bathtub. Apparently that's a quite effective way of dealing with embers inside the roof. And if you do have to stay in place and shelter in place, it's a good idea to keep an eye on what's happening inside your roof space, because there could be fire there and you might not be aware of it, and the ceiling could collapse in on you. Again, Sam and the others from the RFS could probably elaborate more on that, because that's more their territory.
You know, absolutely right, James. Those fires in the ceiling areas are often those hidden ones that we don't immediately spot. So absolutely spot on with that advice. I think that something is better than nothing, and in this case, even though a super soaker is not putting out as much water as a fire truck is, it's certainly better than nothing. And
I think Mark made a comment, or in the chat, always if you're forced to stay shelter in place and you manage to escape your house after the fire front's passed, be aware of trees and branches after a bushfire. They can be very hazardous, they can fall over. And I think that's generally good advice for anyone living near the bushfire area, even after the fire's passed and you're still safe. Don't go bushwalking in fire-ravaged areas, because you could find yourself on the nasty end of a falling branch or a tree.
Absolutely, and that's why Ku-ring-gai often closes the trails around areas where we have those hazard reduction burns going on. It's not just for the heat and the flames; it's also for those branches and trees as well.
So, unless there's any other questions for our expert panel here, I'd like to say, on behalf of the audience, thank you very much, everyone, Sam, Michelle, Angus, Mark, and Jenny, for a fantastic presentation. If anyone watching has any other questions they didn't think of to ask, by all means, go back to the Climate Wise Community's website, ask your question there, and we will do our best to get you an answer from an expert. Please keep an eye on the Loving Living Facebook page, which belongs to Ku-ring-gai Council, where many other environmental events are listed and advertised. And if you have friends and family or acquaintances who live in the St. Ives East area, Eastern, I think, Killara, we're doing a workshop in Killara, is that right, Mark?
East Lindfield.
East Lindfield, sorry, I always get those two.
Pretty near, but
East Lindfield and the Fox Valley area. We are doing targeted workshops for residents living in those areas. We have those workshops. The first one is East St. Ives, and that's on the 19th of October. That's a Tuesday. And then the one for East Lindfield is on the 2nd of November, on a Tuesday as well. And the Fox Valley workshop is on the 16th of November. That's a Tuesday as well. Okay, so please spread the word about these workshops if you have any friends or family or relatives living in those areas. And we will also be doing a storm-themed workshop on the 25th of November. So again, we will be using the sim table, and this workshop will be run in conjunction with the SES, not SAS, SES, Special State Emergency Service. So please come along to that one. We will be showing 3 storms on the sim table from data from the Bureau of Meteorology. So that should be quite interesting. And we will also be running a rainwater tank workshop. So we just discussed how rainwater tanks can be used to fight fires. So, but they're also great for watering your garden as well. So please come along to that workshop. That's on the 13th of October in the evening, around about 6 o'clock or 6:30. So I think that's it for me, unless there's anything anyone else would like to mention before we go. That's a shaking of the head. No, nothing else. We covered everything. Okay, great. Well, I hope you got a lot out of that workshop, and please stay safe this summer and make your plan and make sure it's leave early. Okay, all the best. Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.